On a cold autumn evening in a small town, the moon hung low, casting a silver glow over the rusted train tracks. Sarah was sitting there alone, her eyes fixed on the distant lights of the station. She had always found comfort near the tracks, the sound of the trains soothing her restless mind, but tonight felt different. Shadows danced in the corners of her mind, and she could feel a weight deep in her chest. Wind picked up, rustling the leaves around her, and that's when she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She didn't look up at first, she was too lost in her thoughts to notice what was coming, but then the footsteps stopped and a voice broke through the cold night. Startled, Sarah glanced up. There stood a soldier, his uniform slightly worn but neat. His eyes were kind and his presence felt strong yet gentle. His name was Jake, a quiet man who had seen things that no one should ever have to. But tonight his mission was simple, to help someone in need. I'm fine, Sarah replied, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. She looked away, feeling the vulnerability wash over her. The soldier didn't move, he kept his gaze steady and calm, making it hard for her to look away. I've noticed people don't usually sit here this late, he said softly. That struck a chord somewhere deep inside Sarah. The world had felt increasingly isolating, and sometimes it was easier to just slip away into the shadows. But Jake didn't fade away. He took a seat beside her on the cold metal bench, filling the space with his quiet strength. He asked, genuinely curious. She hesitated, unsure how much she wanted to share, but there was something about him that encouraged her, some safety in his presence. After a deep breath, she opened up. It's hard to explain, she began. I feel trapped. Jake nodded, listening intently. He understood how people could feel lost, even surrounded by others. He had faced his own battles, both on and off the field. You know, he said gently, sometimes we all need a moment to breathe. The conversation flowed easily between them, and for the first time that night, Sarah felt a weight lifting. She spoke of her dreams, the weight of expectations, the pressures that seemed to suffocate her. Jake listened, never interrupting, as she poured out her heart, the fears, the failures, the hopes that felt shattered. Sometimes it feels like I'm on an endless track, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't see where I'm going, it's all just. Jake could relate. Each soldier has their own story, but all carry burdens. Sometimes when you're lost, you just need a little light, he said. His honesty struck her as refreshing. Not many people were willing to show their scars, but here was a man who understood that everyone has their demons. In the stillness of the night, she realized she wasn't alone. Suddenly, the sound of a train horn echoed in the distance, jolting them back to reality. The train rumbled as it approached, shaking the ground beneath them. Sarah shivered, both from the cold and the reminder of her own isolation. The train rushed past, a blur of noise and lights. As it disappeared into the night, Jake sensed her shift in mood. Hey, he said softly, you're not alone in this world. I may be just a stranger, but I care. Sarah hesitated. The path home felt long, but the thought of walking it alone was scarier than the unknown with him. Okay, she replied, her voice stronger now, filled with a spark of determination. They began a walk under the moonlight, the tracks guiding them down the path like old friends. Air was crisp, but with each step, Sarah felt warmer. They talked about everything, how Jake had joined the army to protect people, how he hoped to one day settle down, find love, start a family. Sarah thought of her own dreams hidden beneath layers of fear. She realized she had been so caught up in her doubts that she hadn't dared to dream. He asked, his voice sincere. She took a moment to think. I love to write. Stories have always been my escape. Jake smiled. Why not? Stories are powerful. Her heart swelled. The night felt magic, hanging in the air like the electric hum before a storm. Could she really turn her passion into a career? Jake nodded, sensing her hope take root. Everyone needs a little nudge. They reached a small bridge, the wooden planks creaking under their feet. The stars twinkled above, and the distant glow of street lamps welcomed them home. This is where I turn, she said, feeling a pang of mixed emotions. It had been a simple walk, yet it felt monumental, like crossing a threshold. Let's keep in touch, Jake suggested, his voice warm. Sarah grinned, her heart fluttering with gratitude. She exchanged phone numbers, sealing their newfound friendship with a promise to reach out. As Jake turned to leave, a sudden rush of emotions flooded through her. She exclaimed, her voice trembling, "Thank you for everything tonight." His smile softened. We all need someone sometimes. With that, he walked back across the bridge, a solitary figure fading into the night. Sarah stood there, her heart racing. The light of the street lamps felt brighter, the world a little less heavy. For the first time in a long time, she felt the weight lift from her shoulders. In the weeks that followed, their bond grew stronger. They called each other regularly, sharing not just their struggles but their joys as well. Jake would send her motivational texts, reminding her to keep writing, to dream without limits. His steady presence became a part of her daily rhythm, a little beacon of hope. One day, the sun shone brightly, promising warmth. Sarah decided to take a leap of faith. She submitted one of her stories to a local magazine. Her hands trembled as she hit send, but she knew she could face whatever came next. Days later, she received an email. It read, with tears streaming down her face. Sarah couldn't believe it. The thrill of realizing her dream felt like a huge weight lifting. She rushed to call Jake, her excitement bubbling over as she blurted out the news. "I did it, see," he exclaimed, just as excited. His words echoed in her heart, reminding her of that fateful night by the tracks, how a quiet soldier had found her and walked her home. As they talked, she realized how much their friendship had changed her life. It had been the encouragement she didn't know she needed. Over time, Sarah continued to write, pouring her heart into story after story. She felt more alive than ever, inspired by her journey and the connection she had with Jake. He was still a soldier, still facing his own battles, but their friendship was a source of strength for both of them. Months passed and summer rolled in, bringing warmth and sunshine. On a bright afternoon, Sarah found herself at the station, waiting for Jake. They had planned to celebrate her first published story together. As she stood there, the familiar sound of a train jerked her from her thoughts. In that moment, she realized how the tracks had changed meaning for her. They didn't just symbolize isolation anymore, they represented connection, safety, and dreams. The world ahead was filled with possibilities. When Jake arrived, he wore a broad smile, holding 2 cups of coffee. He said, handing her a cup. Her heart swelled as they shared laughter, tales of dreams, and even hopes for the future. As they sat on the bench, sipping their drinks under the warm sun, Sarah found herself thinking about life's twists and turns. How one small act of kindness, a quiet soldier sitting with a girl on the tracks, could change everything. She glanced at Jake, feeling grateful for that evening when everything had shifted. It wasn't just about walking someone home. It was about the strides they took together, the support they shared, and the trust that grew between 2 people from different worlds. Every story has its ups and downs, she said, reflecting on their journey. Jake nodded, his eyes reflecting the warmth of the sun. Me too. In that small town, a quiet soldier and a hopeful dreamer created their own narrative. Walking together, they showed that even in the darkest moments, there's always a way home. It was a Thursday evening, and the last train had just rattled through the small town of Willow Creek, its screech blending with the whispering wind. In the gloom of twilight, Sarah found herself sitting on the edge of the old tracks, staring into the distance. Her heart felt heavy, burdened by the weight of unspoken dreams and silent fears. She watched as the flickering lights of the train station faded into the shadows. In that moment, she was a ghost in her own life, haunted by worries that consumed her. Around her, the world bustled with life, but Sarah felt frozen. The soft rustle of leaves stirred her from her thoughts, and she took a deep breath, trying to shake off the chill creeping into her bones. That's when she noticed him, his silhouette emerging from the fading light. A soldier dressed in camouflage, his face worn yet determined. He walked with purpose, but as he approached, he paused, taking a moment to assess her before speaking. His voice was low, steady, as if he had faced storms far graver than the one around them. Startled, Sarah looked up. "Yeah, I'm fine," she replied, though the tremor in her voice told a different story. The soldier wore an expression of empathy, a tired kindness that showed he had seen too much pain. "You don't look fine," he said gently. She hesitated but could sense an unexpected comfort in his presence. "Sure," she said, shifting a little to make room on the bench beside her. They sat in silence for a moment, both taking in the surroundings. The air was thick with an uneasy tension, the kind that often comes before a storm. Finally, he broke the silence. "I'm Jake," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "Sarah," she replied, shaking his hand. It felt strong, reassuring. Maybe it was the uniform, but she felt safer somehow. Jake asked, looking into her eyes. "I guess I'm just trying to think," she admitted, glancing away, feeling exposed. "Life feels," Jake nodded, understanding flickering across his face. "I get it. Sometimes the world can feel really heavy." Intrigued, Sarah turned back to him. "You mean like..." He let out a small chuckle as if the weight of his experiences had made laughter a rare gem. "Yeah, among other things." She felt compelled to share her story. It poured out like a rushing river, her dreams of becoming a writer, the struggles with self-doubt, and the crushing fear of never being enough. All the emotions she had bottled up for far too long spilled onto the bench between them. "I feel like I'm stuck on this track," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Jake listened intently, nodding as she spoke. "Sometimes it takes someone to help us see the other side," he said softly. He knew about seeing the world from a different perspective. In his line of work, clarity could mean life or death. As Sarah finished her tale, the weight of her words hung in the air. "I just want to write something that matters, but I don't know how," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "You've already started by speaking your truth," Jake replied, his voice steady and strong. There was something about the way he spoke that made her heart pound with hope. In that fleeting moment, she wished she could capture his words and weave them into her stories. But the train's distant horn pulled her back to reality, the sound reminding her that the world outside was still moving. She asked, turning the conversation back to him. Jake sighed, his eyes narrowing as if reflecting on distant memories. "It was a way to escape, I guess, to be part of something bigger than myself." Sarah asked, genuinely curious. He paused, his expression growing serious. Sometimes I didn't. War changes people. You see things that, well, they stick with you." A silence enveloped them, heavy with unspoken truths. The night closed in and the stars began to twinkle above, tiny pinpricks against the vast darkness. For a moment they were just 2 souls, sharing a moment of vulnerability in an unforgiving world. Another train whooshed by, shaking the ground, and she watched the dark blur disappear into the distance. I should probably get going, Jake finally said, shifting slightly. She asked, a twinge of panic gripping her heart. She didn't want to be alone again, he hesitated. He looked at her, determination flickering in his eyes. How about I walk you home? Relief washed over her like a gentle tide. Yes, please, she replied, gratitude spilling from her heart. As they walked along the tracks, the moonlit path felt transformed, illuminated by the warmth of their companionship. They talked about everything: favorite books, silly childhood stories, and the dreams that flickered like fireflies in their hearts. For a while, the weight of the world fell away. Tell me more about your writing, Jake encouraged, sensing her passion. I've been wanting to write about people's stories, experiences that shape us like yours, she said. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Jake offered. It's moving forward despite it. You have that courage, Sarah. She felt a warmth swell inside her, wrapping around her like a soft, comforting blanket. Each word he spoke ignited a spark deep within her, pushing aside the darkness that had clouded her mind for so long. As they turned off the tracks and headed toward her home, the street lamps flickered, casting their warm glow like gentle smiles. She asked, a hint of mischief in her voice. Jake raised an eyebrow, intrigued. I'd say you're onto something. When they reached her doorstep, Sarah paused, feeling hesitant to say goodbye. Thank you for tonight, Jake. He smiled, his eyes reflecting a sense of purpose. We all need someone sometimes. With a shared smile that held unspoken promises, they exchanged numbers, a promise echoing between them that they would stay connected. As Jake turned to leave, Sarah felt something change within her, a warm glow taking root deep in her chest. Over the next few weeks, their bond grew stronger with each conversation. They shared text messages and late-night phone calls, pouring out the realities of their lives. Jake battled his own demons while Sarah took bold steps towards her dreams, submitting her writing to various places. Each time she felt a little less alone. Just remember, rejection isn't personal, it's just part of the journey, Jake advised one evening when Sarah stormed through the conversation, frustration bubbling in her voice. You make it sound so easy, she joked, but there was a kernel of truth in his words that resonated within her. Nothing worth having ever comes easy, he replied firmly. As summer faded and autumn leaves began to paint the town a brilliant orange, Sarah's confidence blossomed. Each time she picked up her pen, the shadows of doubt that once loomed over her began to wane. She wrote stories that echoed with the same warmth she felt when she was with Jake, stories filled with hope, resilience, and the simple act of connection. Then came the day, a crisp morning filled with promise. She had submitted a piece to a local magazine, and to her astonishment, they wanted to publish it. Her heart raced at the thought. It was the breakthrough she had yearned for. She exclaimed when she called him, her voice caught somewhere between disbelief and elation. See, he cheered, his pride spilling through the phone. As the days turned into weeks, she met each new challenge with Jake's words echoing in her mind. She poured her ideas into a new story, one that was close to her heart, a tale inspired by their first encounter, the quiet soldier with a heart of gold who had found her on the tracks. Their friendship blossomed further. Jake had shared memories from the battlefield, moments that shaped his life. Sarah, in return, infused their conversations into her writings, crafting characters who reflected the journey of the human heart. One evening while they strolled through the park, leaves swirling around them, Sarah suddenly turned serious. Jake, how do you stay so brave? He pondered the question for a moment, his expression turning contemplative. You remember that night on the tracks? You were lost, but you found me and I found you. Sometimes life can feel dark, but it's about finding light where you can. They stopped, gazing at each other under the soft glow of the moonlight. She could see the shadows behind his eyes, yet amidst the darkness there was a flicker of hope that grounded her. Thank you for being that light for me, she said softly, vulnerability woven into her voice. Jake stepped closer, the space between them shrinking. It goes both ways, Sarah. In that moment, something profound shifted in the air. She knew their connection went beyond friendship. It was like two souls who had navigated through storms had finally found a safe harbor. As autumn gave way to winter, Sarah's writing blossomed, fueled by the courage her connection with Jake had ignited. She published more pieces, gaining recognition and a small following. Jake continued to lend his ear, offering encouragement through both the good and the bad. One snowy evening, Sarah decided to surprise him. She brought him a copy of the magazine featuring her story, her heart fluttering with excitement. She said, beaming, her eyes shining. Jake held the magazine in his hands, overwhelmed. This is incredible, Sarah. They stood together there, snowflakes dancing around them like the dreams they were making into reality. The weight of their past seemed lighter, the burdens they carried felt mutual now. As the months turned to years and the seasons continued to change, Sarah never forgot the quiet soldier who had found her on the tracks that fateful night. They continued to walk through life together, united by the strength they gave each other. Their adventures became stories, each page filled with love, compassion, and the undeniable truth that sometimes it just takes one moment, one person to turn the tide and change everything. And every so often they would find themselves back at those old tracks, looking into the distance, remembering how far they had come. In those quiet moments, under the vast sky filled with endless stars, they understood they were never alone on their journey. Together, they created an unbreakable bond connection that would last, lighting the way through the darkest nights, guiding them home. The sound of the trains echoed through the stillness of the night, a lonely whistle cutting through the darkness. Sarah sat on the edge of the train tracks, the rusty metal cooled beneath her fingers. The moonlight draped the world in a silver glow, but all she felt was the weight of shadows pressing down on her heart. It was one of those nights when the silence screams louder than the noise of 100 trains rushing by. Lost in thought, Sarah didn't notice the figure approaching until he was almost beside her. A soldier in uniform, his face lined with fatigue yet holding a certain calmness about him. He asked, his voice a low rumble filled with genuine concern. Startled, she glanced up, meeting his piercing gaze. "I'm fine," she replied, the tremor in her voice giving her away. She turned her gaze back to the tracks, battling the storm stirring inside her. "You don't look fine," he said after a beat, taking a seat next to her on the worn wooden bench. "Suit yourself," she muttered, feeling the vulnerability creep in as he settled down beside her. There was something about the soldier's quiet strength that both unnerved and comforted her. He asked, "Sarah," she replied, still not meeting his eyes. "Jake," he said, extending his hand, and against her better judgment she shook it. His grip was solid, grounding. The tension of silence wrapped around them, thickening the air like fog. Finally, Jake broke it. "This isn't a great place to sit alone at night," he observed, looking around. With a deep breath, Sarah felt a rush of emotion spill over, words tumbling out like leaves caught in the wind. "I don't know, everything feels so heavy." Jake turned his body slightly toward her, attentive now. "Yo, I get that." His words struck a chord, resonating within her. "I feel like I'm stuck," she confessed. "Sometimes it feels like we're waiting for trains that never come," he said, a hint of understanding in his eyes. Something about his presence made Sarah want to share her heart, so she did about her dreams of writing, her fears of failure, the silence of those who didn't understand. She spoke of the emptiness and isolation that gnawed at her, how the world felt like a blurry photograph she could never quite focus on. She asked, barely above a whisper, afraid of the answer. "Absolutely," he said, his voice steady. "In the army it can feel like you're always moving forward but also standing still. War has a way of forging connections, but it also creates distances." His honesty pierced through the night, and for the first time Sarah felt seen. She asked, searching for answers. "Find the light where you can," he replied. A train roared past them, rattling the bench and shaking Sarah back to reality. The noise faded, but the weight of their conversation lingered. Jake asked suddenly, his intention clear. Sarah felt a flicker of unease. Home was not just a place, it was where her anxieties thrived, but there was something reassuring in his offer. "Yeah, okay," she replied, her voice firmer now. They stood together, side by side, stepping away from the cold metal of the tracks. As they walked, the streets felt different, like they were walking through a dream. The cool breeze rustled the trees, and the stars blinked overhead as if cheering them on. "I can't thank you enough for this," Sarah said after a while, glancing sideways at Jake. Jake shrugged, a modest smile playing at the corners of his mouth. As they walked, they talked about their lives. She learned about his small town, his dreams to one day settle down and find peace after his service. In turn, she shared her passion for writing, her desire to tell stories that connected people. "I think stories save lives," she said, her excitement bubbling over. Jake nodded, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "You've got a gift, Sarah, don't hide it away." He said it like he truly believed it, and that made her heart swell. When they reached her house, she hesitated, not wanting the moment to end. "Thanks for walking me home," she said shyly. "Anytime," Jake replied, his voice warm. He turned to leave but paused. "I won't forget," Sarah promised, watching him walk back down the path until he faded into the night. The next day, Sarah couldn't shake the memory of Jake from her mind. His words echoed within her, igniting a fire she hadn't felt in ages. She sank back into her writing, determined to weave the threads of their encounter into something beautiful. Days turned into weeks. She would often find herself sitting at her desk, pouring her heart into stories inspired by their conversations. And just as she'd started to feel a spark of hope, she received a text from Jake. That simple question sent butterflies swirling in her stomach. They began texting regularly, weaving their lives tighter together, a quiet soldier and a dreamer finding solace in each other's words. One afternoon, Sarah worked up the courage to share her latest story. "It's about a soldier and a girl who meet on the tracks. It's about finding light in darkness," she sent. A moment later, Jake replied, "I can't wait to read it." His encouragement wrapped around her like a warm embrace. It's on the tracks felt like a lifetime ago, yet their connection persisted, each message stitching their stories closer together. Then one rainy evening, everything changed. While Sarah was typing away, her phone rang, displaying Jake's name. She asked, desperate for his calming presence. His voice was shaken, barely a whisper. "I'm okay," but her heart dropped. "Just some wounds from training," he said, her breath caught in her throat. His voice cracked, a sign of vulnerability he rarely showed. "Of course," she said, her worry turning into determination. When she arrived at the hospital, the sterile air hit her as she hurried through the doors. She found him in a small room, lying on a bed, pale but still radiating strength. Seeing him like this was a punch to her gut. "Jake," she whispered, rushing to his side. "Hey," he said, his voice strained but gentle. "I didn't want you to worry." But the sight of him in a hospital bed stirred something deep within her. As they talked, she held his hand, grounding him and herself at the same time. In that moment, she realized how much he meant to her. "I've been working on a story about you," she confessed, her voice trembling. His eyes lit up, momentarily pushing past the pain. "It's about bravery, how you walked with me home when I was lost." Jake's smile widened, and even in his state, it radiated warmth. "That sounds like an incredible story." Days turned into a blur of hospital visits and late-night conversations. Sarah learned more about Jake, his fears, his hopes, and the scars he bore. She shared her stories with him, and in these exchanges, they uncovered layers of their souls that had remained hidden. As he healed, so did the bond between them. They spent hours talking, laughing, and finding solace in one another. The track where they first met became more than just a place. It was a symbol of their journey together, a journey forged in resilience. Finally, the day came when Jake was well enough to leave the hospital. As he stood at the entrance, he looked at Sarah, his expression filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said, his voice steady. She took a step closer, her heart swelling. Together, they walked out into the sunlight, the warmth enveloping them like a blanket. With every step, they knew they were embarking on something far more beautiful than either had imagined. Then one day, Sarah turned to him with a serious expression. He raised an eyebrow, a smile creeping across his face. When they arrived, the air felt electric with memories. They sat on the same bench where everything had changed. "This is where it all began," she said, her voice filled with nostalgia. Jake nodded, taking it all in. With her heart racing, Sarah took a breath. "I want you to know that you're not just a soldier to me." He turned to her, surprise flickering in his eyes. "I care about you, Jake, more than I thought possible. You showed me how to find light in the darkest places," she admitted, her heart on her sleeve. Jake leaned closer, vulnerability etched across his face. "I feel the same way, Sarah." In that moment, everything around them faded away. Time stood still. The past, the pain, the stories, they all came together in a beautiful convergence. They shared their first kiss beneath the stars, two souls entwined, reminding one another that they'd always have home in each other. As the moon hung high above and the stars shimmered in the night sky, they reveled in their journey hand in hand, knowing they would always walk each other home. The tracks that once felt lonely transformed into a path of hope, uniting two hearts against the backdrop of the universe. Together, they forged a narrative of resilience, a story that echoed beyond the challenges and the darkness, a story where they found each other in the most unexpected of places and turned uncertainty into a powerful journey of love. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the distant sound of trains rushing through the dimly lit station. Sarah sat on the edge of the old tracks, her heart echoing the rhythm of the world rushing by, but she felt paralyzed, lost in a fog of emotions. The moon hung high, casting a silver glow over everything, yet she felt swallowed by darkness. As she gazed down the tracks, tracing the rusted metal with her eyes, a figure emerged in the yellow lantern light. At first, she thought it was her imagination, a reflection of her own desperate yearning for connection. But as the figure drew closer, she could see it was a soldier dressed in worn camouflage, his face serious yet kind. His voice sliced through the still air, steady like the grounding force of the earth beneath her. Startled, Sarah looked up, her heart racing. "Yeah, I'm fine," she replied, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her truth. He didn't seem convinced. "You don't look fine." Surprised but somehow comforted by his presence, she nodded. He took a seat beside her, the old bench creaking under their combined weight. The tension hung thick in the air, but there was a calming aura around him, a sense of quiet strength that made it hard for her to look away. "I'm Jake," he said, extending his hand subtly, like his presence almost hesitant yet inviting. "Sarah," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, filled with warmth, and she felt an unexpected wave of reassurance wash over her. The two sat quietly for a moment, listening to the wind rustling through the trees, the distant sound of leaves crunching underfoot. Finally, Jake broke the silence. "There's a lot on my mind," she admitted, staring at the ground. "I feel lost." Jake nodded, the weight of understanding evident in his gaze. "I get it. I felt lost 2 more times than I can count." Sarah glanced at him, intrigued. "You're a soldier," she noted. He hesitated, his expression turning thoughtful. "You'd think so, but sometimes being in the army makes you feel even more lost. You see things that haunt you, experiences that change how you connect with the world." Her heart ached for him, the fragility beneath his tough exterior reflected her own struggles. She asked, genuinely curious. "Sometimes you just have to take it one step at a time," he replied, his voice low but steady. The metaphor struck a chord with Sarah. Home was a complex concept, filled with both warmth and the isolation that lurked inside her heart. "I wish it felt that easy for me," she said softly. "Then let's walk together," Jake said suddenly, as if a light bulb had gone off in his mind. "I'm not," she hesitated, but the sincerity in his eyes made her pause. As they stood and stepped away from the tracks, the cool night air wrapped around them. They began to walk side by side, the moonlight creating a path for them. With each step, Sarah felt a little more anchored. They talked about everything, their hopes, their fears, and the dreams that seemed blurred by uncertainty. "I've always wanted to be a writer," she confessed, her heart racing at the admission. Jake asked, genuinely curious, and the softness of his voice encouraged her, peeling away the layers of hesitation. "Because sometimes I feel like the stories I want to tell don't matter, that people won't connect to them," she said, her voice tinged with vulnerability. He stopped suddenly, turning to face her. "Listen, stories do matter. They are what connect us as humans. Every person you meet has a story that shapes them." Sarah felt a flicker of courage in his words, igniting a passion that had long been buried. She asked, searching his eyes for sincerity. "Absolutely," he said, that strong conviction radiating from him. "I've seen how stories can change lives, mine included." With each word, she felt herself opening up like the first bud of spring breaking through the frost. The world around them felt less daunting, the darkness slowly receding. They reached a small bridge, the gentle sound of a nearby stream adding a soft melody to their journey. Sarah ventured, "I wanted to protect what I love," Jake said, his voice growing serious, "but it's also been a way to escape from my own fears." His honesty resonated deeply within her. She whispered more to herself than to him. "Not always," he admitted, glancing off into the distance, "but every connection helps." As they crossed the bridge, Sarah felt like they were stepping into a new chapter, one filled with promise and possibility. The streetlights flickered on, illuminating their path ahead, and she found herself wanting to know more about this quiet soldier beside her. They reached her home, the familiar sight of her modest house embracing her like an old friend. Her heart ached at the thought of saying goodbye. "Thank you for tonight," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake smiled, and in that moment she saw more than a soldier. She saw a soul who understood the storms of life. "It's okay to need someone sometimes. Never forget that," he said, taking a step back. She rushed forward, gripping his arm. "Let's keep in touch, I mean." "Of course," he replied, his smile widening. They exchanged numbers, sealing a connection that felt sudden yet undeniable. Over the next few weeks, the bond between them deepened. They texted regularly, each message bridging the distance between two lonely souls. Sarah poured her heart into writing, fueled by Jake's unwavering belief in her talent. Every time she felt doubt creeping in, she could hear his words echoing in her mind. "Just write." "Don't hold back," he'd remind her, encouraging her to transform her fears into words. It wasn't long before she took a leap of faith and submitted an article to the local magazine, inspired by their conversations. Her heart raced as she hit send, but Jake's unwavering support made her feel brave. When the magazine called back to say they wanted to publish it, tears streamed down her face. She couldn't believe it. "I did it." She cried when she called Jake, her voice breaking with emotion. "I knew you could," he said, pride lacing his voice. She asked, the thrill of accomplishment bubbling over. "Absolutely." The next day, as Jake drove them to a small local cafe, the air felt electric with possibility. They laughed and shared stories, Sarah recounting her struggles with her writing, while Jake opened up about his experiences in the military, the highs and lows that shaped him. With every shared story, a stronger connection formed, weaving an invisible thread between them. After a delicious meal filled with laughter, they took a walk through the park. The sun was dipping low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over everything. "This is nice," Sarah said, glancing sideways at Jake. "Sometimes it's in the mundane moments that we find the greatest joy," he replied, looking thoughtful. Pause turned into silence, and for a moment everything felt perfect. Then round the corner, they stepped back onto the old tracks, the very place they first met. Jake looked at her, a glimmer of nostalgia lighting his eyes. "You know, I've thought about this night a lot. It's incredible," Sarah said, her heart racing. Jake shifted slightly, a vulnerability creeping into his eyes. "You've become really important to me." As the sun set behind them, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Sarah felt a rush of emotions. "You mean a lot to me too, Jake." "Good," he said, stepping closer. "It's a two-way street, you know." In that moment, the world melted away. It felt as if they were the only two people in existence, the connection between them palpable. As the sky darkened above, lit only by the faint glow of starlight, Jake reached for her hand. He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Anything," she replied, her heart pounding in anticipation. I think I'm falling for you, Sarah," he admitted, his gaze steady and sincere. Her breath caught in her throat. Time seemed to stand still, the weight of his words wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. "I feel the same way," she confessed, the truth pouring out like a river. "I didn't expect this, but you've brought light into my life." In that beautiful twilight, they shared their first kiss, tentative at first, then growing passionate as everything that had been left unsaid flowed forth. The connection between them solidified, a promise exchanged beneath the watchful gaze of the stars. As they pulled away, the world felt renewed, filled with endless possibilities. Together, they ventured forward, side by side, illuminated by the glow of newfound love, and Sarah knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. From that night on, the tracks beneath them transformed from a place of solitude to one of connection and growth. They faced struggles, joys, and adventures together, creating a story that intertwined their lives in ways neither had anticipated. In their laughter and shared dreams, they discovered that the darkest nights could indeed lead to the brightest dawns. And as they walked through life hand in hand, Sarah couldn't help but smile, forever grateful that a quiet soldier had found her on the tracks and walked her home. On a moonlit evening, the kind that makes shadows dance across the ground, Sarah sat alone on the old train tracks, lost in a sea of thoughts. The air was heavy with tension, pregnant with the unspoken burdens that crowded her mind. She could hear the distant calls of the trains, their whistles echoing like voices from another world, a world that felt light years away from her own. She had always found a certain solace here, away from the bustling noise of life, but tonight was different. Tonight, the isolation gnawed at her, making her feel smaller than ever, each passing train reminding her of opportunities slipping by. Just then, she heard footsteps crunching on the gravel behind her, and her heart quickened. Should she turn around? It was someone dangerous, but when she did look up, she found herself staring into the deep-set gaze of a soldier. Clad in a crisp uniform, he had an air of quiet strength, his presence striking a stark contrast against the dim surroundings. He asked, his voice calm yet commanding. Startled, Sarah took a moment to find her words. "I'm fine," she replied, though the quiver in her voice betrayed her facade. The soldier studied her, as if weighing her response against the truth he saw in her eyes. "You don't look fine," she hesitated, but then nodded. A part of her felt compelled to let him in, drawn to the aura of reassurance he radiated. He settled beside her on the cold metal bench, the space between them charged with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "I'm Jake," he introduced himself, extending a hand. It was sturdy and warm, grounding. "Sarah," she managed, shaking his hand. They both lingered a moment, their eyes locked, as if sparking an unspoken connection. He asked, looking at the tracks, then back to her. "I needed a break from everything," she confessed, her voice a whisper. "I feel lost." Jake nodded, an understanding glimmer in his eyes. "I get that. Out here, sometimes these tracks feel like they lead nowhere." His words resonated with Sarah. "Sometimes we just need someone to walk with us for a while," he said, his voice steady, like a lighthouse guiding her through a fog. Sarah felt her defenses start to crumble. "That's the hard part," Jake replied thoughtfully. "You either let it crush you or you find a way to carry it." The honesty in his words cut through her loneliness. In that moment, sitting beside this quiet soldier, she felt understood in a way she rarely experienced. She asked, curious. Jake's eyes momentarily darkened, shadows from his past flickering across his face. "You could say that the army gives you a unique perspective on life." She could sense a history written in his features, a story buried beneath layers of stoic strength. The conversation flowed easily between them, as if they had known each other far longer than the few moments that had passed. "I can't keep living in the shadows," Sarah finally admitted, feeling the truth of her own words. Jake leaned in, his gaze steady. "You don't have to walk in darkness alone." The words hung between them like a promise. Just then, a train barreled past, rattling the ground beneath them. As it vanished into the distance, a gust of wind swept through the air, carrying Sarah's swirling thoughts with it. "I should probably get heading home," she said reluctantly, the glow of streetlights illuminating the path behind her. "Let me walk you," Jake offered promptly. A flicker of uncertainty flashed through her. Inviting a stranger into her world felt risky. But the sincerity in his voice made the decision easier. "Okay," she whispered, almost relieved. They stood and began to walk along the tracks, feelings of safety blossoming with every step. The sound of gravel crunching underfoot created a rhythm, a song for two lost souls finding their way back home. As they walked, the conversation deepened. Jake spoke about his experiences, what it felt like to serve, the camaraderie he formed with his fellow soldiers, and the sacrifices made along the way. "Sometimes it feels like we're just cogs in a machine," he said, his voice laced with an almost tangible sorrow. Sarah listened intently, captivated by his vulnerability. "I understand that feeling. It's like the world expects us to fit into a mold, a pathway they've laid out for us. Then we carve our own," Jake replied with a hint of a smile. That spark ignited a flame in Sarah, filling the emptiness within her. "Absolutely," he said, his conviction unwavering. "Your life is yours to shape, and it can take unexpected turns." As they continued to walk, a connection grew deeper, each word stitching them closer together, weaving shared hopes and dreams into a blanket of understanding. The moonlight cast silhouettes against one another, but held an illuminating certainty about the moment. Finally, they reached her street, the familiar comfort of her home looming nearby. Sarah hesitated, reluctant to end the beautiful evening. "Thank you for tonight," she said, her voice softer. Jake's smile was genuine. It's easy to forget how powerful it is to have someone to share our burdens with. A surge of gratitude filled her heart as she exchanged numbers with him, a promise of continued connection lingering in the air. After saying goodbye, she watched him disappear into the night, a sense of warmth replacing her earlier solitude. The days that followed were different. They texted and called, each conversation peeling back layers of their lives, exposing the fragility and strength hidden within. Jake became more than just a soldier, he became a beacon of light in her life. One evening, Sarah sat at her desk, staring at a blank page, feeling the familiar swell of doubt rising. But then her phone buzzed, illuminating with a message from Jake, just right. His words burst through her hesitation, pushing her to pour her heart onto the paper. She wrote about her fears, her dreams, and everything that connected them. With every line, her confidence grew, and a new resolve ignited within her. After days of crafting her work, she summoned the courage to submit her story to a local magazine. Her heart raced as she clicked send, uncertain of the outcome, but trusting that she had taken a leap into the unknown just like Jake had encouraged her to do. When the call came days later, it felt surreal. Congratulations. We'd like to publish your story, the warm voice on the other end said. Sarah screamed in disbelief, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. I did it, Jake, she exclaimed when she called him, barely able to contain the excitement bursting from her. See, he cheered over the line, the pride palpable in his voice. They went to celebrate, laughter and joy filling the air as they relished the significant milestone. Walking down the streets lit by street lamps, their camaraderie deepened, and they shared dreams and fears alike, merging into something beautiful. Eventually, Jake took her to a small cafe, its ambience cozy and inviting. They sat across from each other, discussing her writing, the future, and everything in between. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed, Sarah admitted, chewing her lip. Momentum is nothing without purpose, Jake replied thoughtfully. Sarah pondered the question, tracing the rim of her cup as her heart raced. I want to tell stories that connect people. Jake leaned back impressed. You have that gift. As they finished their coffee, the conversation flowed effortlessly, wrapping around them like a blanket, and for a fleeting moment everything felt right in the world. When they finally left the cafe, Jake turned to her, his expression earnest. Anything, she replied, feeling the air thicken with anticipation. I think I'm developing feelings for you, Sarah, he confessed, his voice earnest and sincere. Her breath hitched as she processed his words. I care about you too, Jake, she admitted, feeling a rush of emotions. Under the glow of the streetlights, they shared a moment of breathless pause filled with the promise of what could be. The world around them faded as they stepped closer, the vulnerability of their connection palpable. In that suspended moment, the barriers of their pasts fell away, leaving them open and raw. Jake leaned in, capturing her lips in a tentative yet passionate kiss. Time slowed as both their fears melted away, leaving behind only authenticity and hope. When they finally pulled apart, the world felt brighter, possibilities igniting like stars in the sky. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah's world transformed. She wrote with newfound determination, inspired by her deepening connection with Jake. They shared their lives, their hopes, and their stories, each entwining with the other, each bringing comfort and warmth. Then the day came when Jake had to leave for training. Dread settled in Sarah's stomach as he packed his bags, the thought of losing their connection terrifying. I'll be back before you know it, he reassured her as he zipped up his duffel. We'll keep in touch. I won't, she promised, her heart aching. They spent one last night under the stars, reflecting on their journey together, both understanding that they had changed each other for the better. With their hands intertwined, they shared hopes, fears, and dreams, knowing that their paths would cross again. As dawn broke and he boarded the bus, a flood of emotion washed over her, sadness, nostalgia, hope all swirling together. She watched him leave, heart in hand, knowing that their connection was worth whatever distance lay ahead. Days turned into weeks, and while they texted regularly, the emptiness was palpable. Yet Sarah pressed on, capturing every feeling in her writing, each word a tribute to their connection, a testament to how they had walked their journeys together. Months later, the call came from the magazine. We'd like to feature your latest work, the voice said. Overwhelmed, Sarah could hardly believe it. She felt the resurgence of the fire that Jake had ignited within her. When Jake returned, it was as if he had never. He rushed to meet her at the tracks, and they fell into one another's arms, laughter and warmth echoing in their shared laughter. The passage of time melted away as they reveled in each other's presence. As they strolled through their favorite park hand in hand, Sarah realized that the journey had transformed them, not just as individuals but as parts of a whole. Together, they had faced darkness and emerged with newfound strength. Standing at the bridge where their relationship had blossomed, Sarah turned to Jake, her heart racing. Anything, he replied. Jake looked deep into her eyes, the promise binding them like the stars above. I promise, he said, the sincerity in his voice wrapping around her like a safe haven. With that, they sealed their promise with a kiss, the world fading away once more. Their love had grown, tethered not just by circumstance, but by the choice to weather the storms together. And as they stood on those tracks, once a symbol of solitude now transformed, reflecting a journey filled with love, hope, and resilience, Sarah knew they could face whatever lay ahead, hand in hand, heart to heart. Together, they had carved their own path, illuminated by the light they had once hoped to find. A quiet soldier found her on the tracks and walked her home. In that simple act, they both discovered the profound power of connection, a bond that could weather any storm. Their story, intertwined and resilient, would forever be a testament to the beauty of vulnerability, the bravery of sharing burdens, and the light that can shine in the darkest of nights. The cold wind howled through the empty streets, stirring the falling leaves and sending them swirling like dancers in a forgotten play. Sarah sat on the edge of the train tracks, her mind racing in circles, trapped in a storm of thoughts. She felt as if the world was moving on without her, the trains that rumbled past serving as a constant reminder of everything she was missing. The twilight sky painted shades of orange and purple, yet she was lost in gray. There was something comforting about the metal tracks beneath her, a reminder that she was anchored to something solid even while her emotions felt adrift. But as she gazed down the line, waiting for a train that wouldn't come, a flicker of movement caught her eye. It was then that she saw him. A soldier, his uniform slightly rumpled but still crisp, was walking purposefully along the tracks. His face was calm, yet something in his eyes hinted at stories untold. He paused as he approached her, his presence radiating a quiet strength. He asked, his voice deep and warm. Startled, Sarah blinked as if waking from a dream. "I'm fine," she replied, but the tremor in her voice gave her away. The soldier raised an eyebrow, not buying her facade. "You don't look fine." A part of her hesitated. She didn't want to share her burdens with a stranger, but there was an inviting aura about him that made her nod. He sat beside her, the weight of his presence enveloping her like a comforting blanket. "I'm Jake," he said, extending a hand. "Sarah," she replied, shaking it, feeling the warmth of connection spread through her. Jake asked, gazing out at the tracks as if they held answers. I needed to escape," she admitted, glancing at him. Did thoughtfully, and the wind carried an echo of understanding between them. "I get it," he said quietly. Her heart quickened at his words. "Exactly, I hear you," he said softly, and something in his eyes made her feel seen. "We all have our battles." With every word, she felt the weight on her chest lessen, as if the air had shifted between them. Feeling bold, she shared her fears, how she dreamed of writing but felt paralyzed by doubt, hidden behind a wall of expectations. "It's exhausting. I feel like I'm screaming into an empty void," she confessed, her voice cracking. Jake's expression softened. "You know, everyone has a story to tell. Don't underestimate your voice." Sarah felt something shift within her. It was rare to be so openly vulnerable. "I know so," he replied, his calm conviction filling the space around them. Before she could respond, the rumble of an approaching train broke the moment, shaking the ground beneath them. Sarah instinctively turned to watch the massive locomotive barrel past, its whistle echoing like a banshee in the night. When it vanished, an uncomfortable silence settled in. "Maybe I should go," she said, the urge to retreat creeping back. "Let me walk you home," Jake said quickly, sensing her wavering confidence. She hesitated again, the fear of letting a stranger into her life battling with the growing connection between them, but looking in his eyes, she saw sincerity. "Okay," she nodded after a moment. As they walked, the air filled with unspoken promise. The night sky seemed to stretch above them, stars twinkling like distant dreams, illuminating their path ahead. Each step felt lighter, the burdens of the world fading with every conversation. They shared quiet stories, each word weaving a bond that began to stitch her heart back together. Sarah asked, her curiosity piqued. "I try to find moments of peace," Jake replied. "It's the little things that matter, like the taste of fresh coffee in the morning or the quiet of a starry night." Sarah considered this, reflecting on the small joys in her own life, books, laughter, and sunsets. "Maybe I've been focusing too much on what I lack instead of what I have," she mused. "Everything is a choice," Jake said, turning to her, eyes sincere. "You can choose to wallow in darkness or find the light, no matter how faint." They walked through the quiet streets, their surroundings illuminated by the occasional street lamp flickering like a heartbeat. Each shared thought felt like a step closer to healing. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt anchored, as if Jake's presence was a lifeline pulling her from the depths of despair. Eventually, they reached her home. Sarah looked up at the familiar facade, relief washing over her but tinged with disappointment. "Thank you for walking me," she said softly. "It was my pleasure," Jake replied, his voice low and sincere. Jake's smile deepened. "I'd like that." They exchanged numbers, an unspoken promise binding them to this newfound connection. As he stepped back into the street, a sense of warmth lingered in the air, like a gentle hug wrapping around her heart. The days passed, but Sarah found her heart racing every time her phone buzzed. Jake's messages came often, each one a little thread weaving their lives tighter together. They shared thoughts on life, dreams, and stories, and slowly Sarah began to craft her own narratives again, fueled by the support she found in his words. One day, feeling emboldened by their conversations, Sarah decided to submit a piece to a local magazine. Her hands trembled as she clicked send. It felt both liberating and terrifying. "Good luck." "You're amazing at this," Jake texted moments later, filling her with warmth like a sunbeam on a chilly day. Weeks passed and the anticipation was electric. When she finally received an email saying the magazine wanted to publish her work, tears of disbelief streamed down her cheeks. "I did it," she screamed into the phone when Jake picked up. He replied, his excitement palpable. Their first in-person celebration took place in a cozy cafe, the air filled with the aroma of coffee and pastries. Laughter flowed freely, pushing the shadows away. Sarah said as they nibbled on dessert, her eyes shining with gratitude. "With what you're capable of, I just nudged you to take that leap," Jake replied, a faint smile playing on his lips. In those moments, Sarah felt as if she had been buried under layers of uncertainty, and Jake was the sunlight breaking through the soil, coaxing her back to life. She felt lighter, empowered, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. As they walked together after their celebration, Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of their connection. "I never thought I'd meet someone like you," she said. Jake chuckled, looking down the dimly lit path ahead. "Similarly, I never expected to find someone who gets me so quickly. The calm night felt electric all around them. Underneath the stars, their friendship formed the groundwork for something deeper." As they stopped at the bridge where they had exchanged truths and vulnerabilities, Sarah's heart raced. She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Anything," Jake said, leaning closer. "I think I'm falling for you," she confessed, her pulse quickening as his eyes widened. A smile broke across Jake's face, illuminating the night. Instantly, the space between them disappeared, their lips meeting in a tentative yet electric kiss. It felt as if the world had spun away, leaving only the two of them blazing under the stars. When they finally pulled away, Sarah's heart soared. She asked, breathless, "Now we keep walking this path together, hand in hand," Jake said softly, comfortingly. And so it was. Their bond deepened with each passing day, filled with laughter, shared dreams, and profound understanding. They became each other's confidants, navigating the winding roads of life together. But life has its own way of throwing curveballs. A few months later, Jake received orders for training, a sudden and unforeseen shift that tightened the knot of anxiety in Sarah's chest. She asked, her voice wavering as he packed his bags, the reality sinking in. "I'll be back, I promise," he reassured her, squeezing her hand tightly. Their last night together was filled with bittersweet joy beneath a blanket of stars. "You know," he said, his tone earnest, "every journey away from home reminds me of how much I care for you." "I feel the same," she replied, tears pooling in her eyes. "You've been my lighthouse in the storm. I'll be here in spirit," Jake whispered, brushing her hair back. As he left, Sarah felt a piece of her heart drift away with him. Days turned into weeks, and while they kept in touch through messages, the physical distance felt insurmountable at times. Still, each text reminded her of their promise, a commitment to keeping their connection alive despite the miles. In the quiet moments, she dove deeper into her writing. Each word became a lifeline, weaving her emotions into stories that echoed her journey. The doubt that once gripped her heart began to fade as she poured herself onto the pages, feelings released like balloons floating into the sky. Finally, the day came when Jake returned. Sarah stood on the same bridge where everything began, anticipation bubbling in her chest. She spotted him in the distance, marching towards her, a smile lighting up his face. As he closed the gap, she felt a rush of exhilaration. She exclaimed, flinging her arms around him, her heart soaring as he lifted her off the ground, spinning her around. "I've missed you more than words can say," he said, setting her down gently, his eyes searching hers. "Felt like an eternity," she admitted, her heart swelling. "Let's celebrate what we've built together," Jake suggested, his warmth sending waves of comfort through her. They spent the day under the sun, revisiting all the places that held memories of their shared journey. Sarah shared her stories, and Jake listened intently, nodding, his eyes glued to her, filled with pride. "I love how much you've grown," he told her, the sincerity in his voice making her heart flutter. As twilight descended, they found themselves back at the tracks, standing in the soft moonlight. "This is where it all began," Sarah said, her voice reflective. Jake smirked, brushing his fingers across the rusted metal. "Remember that night?" A deep sense of fulfillment washed over her as they stood side by side, hands intertwined. "You walked me home when I didn't know the way," Sarah said, taking a breath. "And you showed me what it means to find light," Jake replied, the weight of their shared experiences heavy with meaning. Under the sprawling stars, they shared a quiet moment filled with promises and an understanding of their journey. The tracks, once a place of solitude, had transformed into a symbol of their growth together, a shared path marked with laughter, tears, and resilient love. They faced the darkness together, holding tight to the light they had found in each other. As they made their way back home, Sarah smiled, knowing that the seasons of their lives had forever intertwined, guiding them through the uncertain paths ahead. With every step, she knew they had each other, and in that bond they would thrive. Together they found home in one another, proving that sometimes a quiet soldier could lead you back to yourself. The sharp whistle of a distant train pierced through the stillness of the night, echoing down the deserted tracks where Sarah sat alone, her heart heavy with doubt. The weight of her thoughts pressed down like an anchor, pulling her deeper into gloom. She stared at the rusted rails, illuminated by the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, and couldn't shake the feeling that life was racing past her, leaving her stranded in a fog of uncertainty. As she felt the cool metal beneath her fingers, she wished for a sign, anything to help her find her way again. Just then, she heard footsteps crunching on the gravel, interrupting her solitude. Startled, she looked up to see a soldier approaching, his uniform slightly rumpled but still remarkably crisp, paired with a quiet confidence that caught her off guard. "Hey," he called out, his voice cutting through the night air. "I'm fine," Sarah replied quickly, but even she could hear the uncertainty in her tone. The soldier paused, studying her expression as if searching for the truth behind her reply. "You don't look fine," he said matter-of-factly. For a brief moment, Sarah hesitated. Trust was a precious commodity, but there was something about the man standing before her that felt genuine. "Sure," she said, inching aside to make space on the bench. He introduced himself. "I'm Jake," he said, extending a hand. She took it, feeling the warmth and strength radiate through his grip. "Sarah," she replied, surprised at how nice it felt to connect with someone again. He asked, looking out toward the tracks reflecting the moonlight. "I needed to think," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "Everything feels like it's closing in on me. Jake nodded, understanding flickering behind his eyes. "I know what that feels like." She looked at him, surprised by his honesty. The question hung in the air, heavy with curiosity. He took a moment, choosing his words carefully. His gaze turned serious. The sincerity in his voice hit her like a wave. Somehow it felt okay to share more. "I've always thought of writing, you know." Jake leaned in, his expression earnest. "The act of writing itself is brave. You have a unique story to tell. Don't let fear stop you." His words sparked something within her, igniting a flicker of hope that had been buried deep. "Absolutely," he replied, a smile breaking through. "Our experiences shape us, and sharing them can bridge the divide between ourselves and others." As they spoke, time melted away. She found herself opening up about her dreams, her fears, and all the moments that felt like they were holding her back. Listening to Jake was like breathing fresh air after being trapped for too long. Suddenly, another train roared past, its horn echoing like a ghost wandering through the night. It shook the ground beneath them, a reminder of the world outside her mind. When it passed, the ensuing silence felt heavy, almost oppressive. "I should probably head home," she said, sensing the walls of uncertainty creeping back in. "Let me walk you," Jake offered, his voice firm yet inviting. A twinge of anxiety crept into Sarah's heart. Was it wise to trust him, a stranger, with her safety? But something in his gaze made her feel she could let her guard down, if only for a moment. "Okay," she said, her voice gaining strength. Together they stepped off the tracks and onto the pavement, where the streetlights created pools of light in the darkness. Walking side by side, the initial apprehension transformed into an unexpected comfort. As they walked, they talked about everything: his time in the army, the sense of camaraderie, the struggles he faced while serving. There was a depth to Jake that resonated with her, a rich tapestry of experiences woven with resilience. "Being in the military has its moments," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper as if sharing a secret, "but it can be crushing too." Sarah listened closely, feeling the gravity of his words, but in the midst of the struggle there was also a glimmer of hope. She asked, intrigued. "By finding strength in the people around me," he replied. "We all need a support system." The conversation shifted something deep within Sarah. She realized how much she craved that connection, the kind that could pull her from the depths of her isolation. Everything felt a little lighter as her laughter mingled with his, a sweet melody echoing on the cool night air. Just as they turned a corner, they came across a small park, a hidden gem tucked away from the street. The trees loomed above them, their leaves whispering secrets to one another as they moved in the gentle breeze. Jake asked, gesturing toward a bench. With a nod, Sarah perched on the edge, still buzzing from the connection they were weaving. "This feels nice," she remarked, glancing around. "It's easy to overlook the little gems around us," Jake said, looking up at the stars beginning to twinkle overhead. As they sat in comfortable silence, Sarah felt a calm wash over her, a sense of belonging she had longed for. "Thank you for this," she said finally, "for listening." Jake smiled, his eyes softening. "You're stronger than you know." It takes a lot to open up. With those simple words, she felt a flicker of courage kindling inside her, a reminder that maybe she could take those leaps of faith in her writing and in life. Eventually, they stood up and the night air felt rich with promise. As they walked toward her house, the streetlights glimmered like stars, lighting the way home. When they reached her doorstep, Sarah hesitated, not wanting the evening to end. She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," Jake replied, an easy smile falling into place. They exchanged numbers, sealing a quiet promise that lingered between them. As Jake turned to leave, a surge of gratitude bubbled up within her. "Thank you for everything." He looked back at her, a warmth radiating from his expression. "You're not as alone as you think, Sarah." With that, he stepped back into the night and she watched him disappear down the quiet street. The weight on her heart had lifted, if only a little, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of hope. In the weeks that followed, their friendship blossomed. Texts flew back and forth, sharing bits of their lives, Jake's stories from the army and Sarah's progress on her writing. In their conversations, Sarah found a flicker of inspiration, urging her to dive deeper into her craft. One sunny afternoon, she sat at her desk, feeling the sunlight streaming through the window, and had an idea for a story. The words flowed freely, pouring out of her like water from a spring. That gentle push from Jake echoed in her mind, urging her to embrace her voice. When she finished her piece, her heart raced at the thought of submitting it to a local magazine. She hesitated but thought of Jake's belief in her. Just do it, she muttered to herself, and with a determined click, she sent it off. Days felt like an eternity, each moment stretching longer than the last. When the email arrived saying they wanted to publish her work, Sarah nearly dropped her phone. Joy erupted from within her, happiness spilling over as tears flooded her eyes. "I did it," she exclaimed as she dialed Jake, her voice brimming with excitement. Jake cheered on the other end, and Sarah felt that warmth wash over her once more. Their first celebration came soon after. They met at a small cafe, the ambience cozy and filled with laughter. Jake exclaimed, basking in her excitement. Sarah felt her cheeks flush as they toasted to her achievement. "I couldn't have done it without your encouragement. Never give up," he said, his tone serious yet tender. As the sun began to dip low in the sky, casting a golden hue across their table, Sarah looked at Jake, feeling a warmth bloom within her. "Deal," he said with a smirk, and they both laughed, a sound so genuine that it filled the air like music. With every passing day, their connection grew, entwined in shared dreams and the understanding that they were there for each other. He explored local parks, visited quaint little shops, and on quiet evenings returned to that same spot on the tracks where they had first found each other. But life has its way of changing directions. One evening, an unsettling message from Jake broke the comforting routine. "I have to go back for training," it read, fear clawed at her heart. She texted back, breathless, "I don't know yet, a few weeks, maybe more," he replied. The days leading up to his departure felt heavy with an unspoken weight. She asked as he packed, anxiety creeping into her voice. "I'll be fine," he said, though she could see an underlying strain in his eyes. "Just focus on your writing." Their last night together brimmed with bittersweet memories. They laid on the grass under the stars, lost in conversation, everything feeling painfully perfect. She asked softly. "Anything," he replied, shifting to face her. "Promise me you'll come back," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Jake looked at her earnestly. "I promise." With that promise sealed under the night sky, they shared a long embrace that made time feel irrelevant. And then he was gone. Days turned into weeks, and while they texted regularly, the absence of his warm presence felt heavy. Sarah poured herself into her writing, letting her emotions spill onto the pages, capturing the essence of their shared journey with every word. She felt less alone, embracing the strength they had built together. When the call finally came from the magazine asking to feature another of her pieces, Sarah's heart danced in her chest. She felt triumphant, but the victory felt hollow without Jake to share it with in person. With his return looming closer, Sarah prepared herself. She wanted to showcase everything she had done during his absence, how his unwavering faith in her was an anchor during stormy seas. The day of his return, excitement fluttered in her chest like 1,000 butterflies. She stood at their favorite spot along the tracks, anticipation bubbling over. When she spotted him walking towards her, all the worry washed away in an instant. He rushed forward, wrapping her in a tight embrace, the air around them electric with familiarity. When they pulled apart, his eyes sparkled with something she couldn't name. "You look different," he said, taking her in. "I've been writing," she said, her voice steady. "I'm proud of you," Jake replied, sincerity in every syllable. They spent the day together, and Sarah shared her latest success, the excitement radiating like sunbeams. As she spoke, Jake listened intently, nodding, pride washing over him. "This is incredible," he said, admiration spilling from his words. As dusk began to cloak the world in shadows, they returned to their sacred bridge. The stars emerged one by one, and Sarah took a deep breath, feeling a warmth spread through her. She asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Of course," he replied, turning to face her. "I really missed you, not just as a friend, but more than that." The weight of her admission hung in the air, filled with nervous anticipation. Jake stepped closer, deepening the bond that had formed between them. "I missed you too," he said, his voice as steady as the night sky. With courage sparking between them, Jake leaned closer and brushed his lips against hers, a sweet, tentative touch that felt like coming home. As their kiss deepened, the world around them faded into nothingness. Everything that had once felt heavy drifted away, leaving only the warmth and certainty of their connection. When they finally pulled away, breathless and grinning like the sun, Sarah knew deep in her heart that they were destined to journey this path together. Walking home that night hand in hand, Sarah looked up at the sky twinkling with stars. Each one felt like a promise, a reminder that the journey would continue, that they would lean on each other through the dark and celebrate the light they had found. Together, they forged a path lit by hope, resilience, and love, a journey that healed them both, reminding them that sometimes a quiet soldier can find a lost soul on the tracks and walk her home. Their stories, once separate, now intertwined, would echo long after the stars had vanished from view, and as long as they had each other, they could face whatever lay ahead. The moon hung low over the deserted train tracks, casting a silvery light that made the rusting metal glint in the night. Sarah sat on the edge of a weathered bench, her heart heavy as she watched shadows dance around her, pulled by the night's cool breeze. She felt the weight of the world pressing down on her, each passing train echoing in her mind like a reminder of everything she was missing. She had always come to this spot to think, to escape the chaos of life that loomed over her like a storm cloud, but tonight was different. Tonight, the silence screamed at her. She felt trapped, caught in a cycle of self-doubt and uncertainty. For a moment she closed her eyes, wishing for clarity, a sign that everything would be okay. Then she heard footsteps approaching, the crunch of gravel breaking through her solitude. Opening her eyes, she turned her head to see a soldier walking toward her, his uniform slightly rumpled but unmistakably neat. His face was serious, yet there was a softness around his eyes that made her feel an odd mix of apprehension and comfort. He asked, stopping just a few feet away, concern etched into his features. "I'm fine," Sarah replied, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her confidence. "You don't look fine," he said gently. Caught off guard, she hesitated but then nodded. He settled onto the bench beside her, the weight of his presence drawing her out of her own thoughts. "I'm Jake," he introduced himself, offering his hand. "Sarah," she said, shaking it. His grip was strong, firm, radiating warmth, a stark contrast to the cold metal of the bench. He inquired, tilting his head slightly as if he genuinely wanted to know. She hesitated, her heart racing as she considered how much to reveal. "Just, the truth was she felt lost. Everything feels like it's moving so fast and I'm just standing still," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake nodded, his gaze steady. "I get that. Sometimes it feels like the world is racing by while you're stuck in one place." "Yes, exactly," she replied, the weight of her words hanging in the air. He leaned in closer, drawing her attention. "You're not alone in feeling that way. Everyone faces their own battles, whether they show it or not," he said softly. His words resonated with her, stirring something she thought had long been buried. She asked, sensing depth behind his quiet demeanor. Jake took a breath, his posture shifting slightly. "Yeah, the army changes you in ways you don't always expect." Sarah felt an overwhelming urge to share, and before she knew it, she poured out her heart. She spoke of her dreams, how she once aspired to be a writer but had let fear stifle her ambition. "I just feel like I'm not good enough," she admitted, tears threatening to spill. Jake listened intently, his expression unyielding but empathetic. "Your words matter," he replied earnestly. The tension in her chest began to loosen. She found comfort in his honesty, something she had craved for so long. She whispered, "Failure is part of growth. Not every train is going to stop for us, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying," he said, his tone unwavering. Jake's conviction filled the air between them, igniting a fire in her heart that had long been extinguished. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Sarah believed she could break through the wall that confined her. As if sensing her change in spirit, Jake glanced toward the tracks where the sound of an approaching train echoed through the night. "You should remind yourself that every train has a destination, just like we do." His words washed over her like soothing balm, and she nodded, feeling empowered. She wanted to open up more, to delve deeper into the possibilities that lay ahead. But just then a loud horn blared and the train thundered past, shaking the ground beneath them. When it had passed and silence returned, Sarah felt a pang of dread washing over her, a fear of losing this moment, this connection. She asked suddenly, vulnerability spilling from her heart. He smirked, an easy smile lighting up his face. "Of course." Relief washed over her as they rose from the bench, and their journey began down the quiet street, illuminated by the soft glow of street lamps. Walking side by side, they exchanged stories about their lives, their dreams, and the burdens they carried. "Tell me about your training," she prompted, curious about more than just the uniform he wore. Jake hesitated, his expression turning serious. "The army is full of camaraderie, but it also shows you the fragility of life," he said quietly. She could hear the weight of experience in his voice, and it felt grounding. "Absolutely," he replied. "Connection is what keeps us alive, it's what gives us strength." As they continued walking, she felt a growing sense of kinship, a bond forming in the space between their conversations. It was as if the world around them faded, leaving only the essence of their shared struggle and hope. Their path led them towards a park, and soon they found themselves surrounded by the soft rustle of leaves, illuminated by the twinkling stars above. "This place feels magical," Sarah said, taking a moment to breathe it in. Jake smiled and nodded. "It's one of my favorites." It's easy to overlook the beauty around us when life feels chaotic. A question arose in Sarah's mind, caught somewhere between excitement and anxiety. "What if I wrote about this?" "Do it," he urged, his eyes shining with encouragement. "Write about the connections we forge in moments of darkness." She felt a spark ignite within her, a realization that brought warmth filling her heart. "You're right." "Then embrace it," Jake said, an air of confidence surrounding him. They both basked in the newfound understanding, the potential for building something beautiful from their shared experiences. As they made their way toward her home, she could sense the night climaxing with emotions swirling like a delicate dance, but arriving at her doorstep brought a familiar flutter of uncertainty back to the surface. "Thank you for tonight," she said, her voice slightly tense. "It was my pleasure," Jake replied, glancing down the street. They stood close for a moment, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. There was something unreal about their connection, an energy that crackled in the air. Before she knew it, Sarah leaned in, compelled by an instinct she couldn't name. Their lips met in a tentative kiss, soft at first, but then deepening into something more passionate. The world disappeared as they drew closer, their hearts beating in unison, drowning out the chaos around them. It felt real, immersive, and electric, everything she had been craving. But just as quickly as it began, reality crashed back in and they pulled apart, breathless and startled by the vulnerability. The weight of unspoken words hung heavy in the air. "I should go," Jake said, stepping back reluctantly. "Please do," she whispered, knowing that whatever lay ahead, this moment would remain etched in her memory. As he turned and walked away, Sarah felt a mix of exhilaration and concern. She didn't want to let this connection slip away, but the uncertainty loomed larger as he disappeared into the night. Days turned into weeks, and while they exchanged frequent messages, the absence of Jake's presence felt haunting. Still, Sarah poured herself into her writing, weaving the emotions they had shared onto the pages like a lifeline pulling her from despair. Then came the night that changed everything. Sarah was sitting in her room, typing away furiously as inspiration surged through her. The sun had set long ago, but the glow of her desk lamp filled the space around her with warmth. Suddenly, her phone buzzed and a text from Jake lit up the screen. An unease washed over her, a chill creeping down her spine. She replied quickly, worry flooding her thoughts. The reply came immediately. "Can you meet me at the tracks?" Her heart raced. She grabbed her jacket and rushed out the door, the cool night air hitting her face like a splash of cold water. As she hurried to the tracks, the night felt heavy with tension. Shadows danced around her as she crossed the empty streets, each step echoing in the stillness. What could be so urgent? Was he okay? When she arrived, the moon cast a dim light over the familiar metal, but Jake was nowhere in sight. Anxiety clawed at her as she took a deep breath, trying to quell the rising panic. She called into the darkness, her voice wavering slightly. Silence answered her, and for a moment all she could hear was the distant rustle of leaves. Just when she began to worry that he had changed his mind, she heard footsteps behind her. He stepped out from the shadows, his expression frantic and serious. She asked, urgency flooding her voice. His eyes shifted, glancing around as if the shadows themselves were conspiring against them. "I shouldn't have brought you here." She felt a rush of fear, her heart pounding in her chest. "I can't go into detail, but there's something I'm involved in, something dangerous," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The intensity of his gaze made her shiver, fueling her curiosity. Her mind raced, analyzing every detail of the night as she tried to grasp the gravity of the situation. "I can't say much. But I need to keep you safe, and that means," he hesitated, searching for the right words. The pain of his words stabbed through her. She felt like the ground had suddenly shifted beneath her. "What? No." Panic surged through her, and the walls she had let down began to rise again. "It's for your own safety," he insisted, his voice laced with urgency. "If you're involved in this, it could put you in danger." Her world was spiraling out of control, and she struggled to hold onto something steady. Jake stepped closer, his hands grasping her shoulders. "I will explain everything when the time is right." The sincerity and fear in his eyes struck her to her core. They stood there, caught in a moment of deep uncertainty, the weight of 1,000 unsaid words hovering between them. She asked, her voice trembling. His words struck a chord of desperation, and she found herself nodding. With that, Jake took a step back, vulnerability passing through his features as he glanced down the tracks. "I promise I'll reach out, but as he turned to walk away, fear flooded her once more, instincts battling within her. "Wait, I can't just let you go without knowing what's going on," she pleaded. He hesitated, then turned back to face her, the moonlight painting their faces in stark contrast. With those final words, he walked away, his silhouette fading into the shadows, leaving Sarah grappling with an overwhelming tidal wave of confusion and worry. As she stood there alone on the tracks, the realization dawned on her. Life was spiraling into chaos once again. Every promise they had made felt tenuous, teetering on the edge of uncertainty. The world around her dimmed into silence, the echoes of their conversation lingering like distant thunder. She was left standing at the crossroads of a life-altering decision, unsure of what lay ahead, a path filled with unknowns that had the power to change everything. In that moment, she sensed the storm brewing on the horizon, a battle that would test their connection like never before, and she was left wondering if the quiet soldier who had found her in the darkness would return to walk her home again.